I know it was recently with Logan Paul and Roman Reigns, they had a press conference over like their world title match coming up next month at Crown Jewel. And there was a lot of different press there, especially that was really like fighting and boxing centric. And a lot of them got to interview Roman and Logan after the show. But like you don't really see that too often with like wrestling media showing up at these press conferences. Here and there we get a couple guys, but not all the time and consistently. Do you feel like the WWE just doesn't like the wrestling media landscape? And if so, how does wrestling media learn to like change that narrative and have a healthy relationship with the company?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's really hard to compare the current mindset versus the former mindset because they are drastically different, I think, in my opinion. You know, I think that if you're looking at the old era of things and the way it was done before, I think the way they looked at it was the wrestling media is going to cover wrestling whether we invite them or not. Yeah. So we don't really have to invite them, I think. And so if you look at it in terms of like, if you're a PR person and you're trying to get as much media coverage as possible, and let's say you only have X amount of spots, you're going to invite the people who are, you know, part of actual publication, you know, not something that's just a wrestling publication. Because you, from a PR perspective, you want to get it on all the major publications, you know, and like I said, all the wrestling sites are going to cover it anyways, no matter what. And I do think that the current regime has a much different relationship with the wrestling media. When Triple H was in charge of NXT, he had regular calls with the media, good relationship with all of them, invites to the Performance Center, where you could, you know, I got to go to the Performance Center for the NXT, the first time NXT was going to be on TV, did a tour of the place, got to learn how it ran. You know, he remembered people's names, you know, like he'd say, hey, thanks for this or that. He talked to them like he wanted them to cover what he was doing. I think it was different, not because he needed it or whatever, but I think that Triple H is a wrestling fan, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, like he has a different view of things than someone who has been at the top of the industry and in a way molded the entire industry for decades. I think he just has a different view of things. And so former regime with me, I think I was always a little different. I started at a major publication and helped them when it came to pro wrestling. Like I helped, not to like pat myself on the back.
No, go ahead.
Anything, but like you wouldn't see wrestling coverage on TMZ if I hadn't have been there. You know, like you wouldn't have seen the story about Andrade and Sammy Guevara fighting if I had never been at TMZ, because before me at TMZ, they were like, we don't want to cover wrestling. Like when I started pitching wrestling stories, they were like, hey, can you pitch something else? You know? And so, so I think that, you know, because of that, I've always had a different relationship with them because I did, you know, handle things differently. Like I didn't start just as a wrestling news guy. And honestly, when I started my website, I had to regain that trust in them. Like I absolutely was like feeling myself like, oh, I got this great relationship, you know, and then instantly back to the bottom, you know? So it was like, I'm back, you know, with all the rest of the wrestling media being left out of things, and I had to work my way back into being invited to getting on WWE Backstage, to getting the position I have now. And so, so yeah, I think that, yes, there is there things could be better, but I do see a huge difference in just the past few months. Like the fact that they had that press conference, that's pretty cool. Like they aren't doing that normally with like anything with WWE usually. So I like it. I think, but I do think that, yeah, of course there could be improvements made. Absolutely. I think that, like, I hate to say this because it's giving me competition, but they should give more interviews to the wrestling media. Like they shouldn't ice the wrestling media out of things. Like I think they're fans at the end of the day. And I think that you want fans who are watching your product to be energized by it. I mean, like, just look at this White Rabbit stuff. People are energized by it. They're excited, you know, and it's interactive. And so you want the fan base to be energized like that rather than feel like they're being forgotten.